And let's catch up with Richard Bearman, who's the chairman of the Norwich cycling campaign, and joins me now. Richard, good morning.
Good morning, Kayleigh. How is everybody?
Yeah, it's very well. Interesting and rather peculiar news, this, isn't it? So, I mean, if I've told you you've got to now pay insurance to use your bike and I'm going to slap a number plate on it, how do you feel about that, Richard?
Well, I think we have to bear in mind the context of this story coming out in the middle of the silly season. It's been proposed before, and every time that registration for cyclists has been looked at, it's deemed to be completely unworkable for a start. But also, what's it trying to achieve? If registration and insurance achieved greater road safety, surely all the years of vehicle registration insurance would have made us the safest driving country on the planet.
It's a fair point. And I think that this is just the annoying thing, isn't it? And I think that there's always this kind of divide. But actually, it's normally just a very small minority of people, regardless of what they're using on the road, that tend to break the rules. And probably even if they had a number plate, would probably still break the rules anyway. But I mean, for the majority of cyclists, I'm guessing for you, Richard, it must be annoying to sort of think, well, we're kind of at a point where I think climate change has been more thrust upon us than ever before with the heat that we've had. You know, this is clearly good for the environment, it's good for congestion. Does it feel a little bit like you're kind of, I mean, you're almost being, forgive the pun, but you're almost being taxed for this? You're almost kind of being, punished just because you're on a cycle.
Well, yes, because cycling is not only good for the environment and congestion on our road space. The more people who cycle, the less space they take up. It's good for your personal health. It's well known the medical profession is very keen on regular exercise, and cycling is one of those forms of exercise, is walking is another. But on the question of road safety, the data that was quoted in the Evening News yesterday, 2019, 470 pedestrians were killed in collisions, 5 involving cyclists, but 454 involving collisions with vehicles. If safety is the issue, we ought to be looking at the vehicles that can cause most damage to pedestrians. I think there's an educative process here as well. At Norwich Cycling Campaign, we support riding according to the highway code and behaving properly on the roads, but also education. Cyclists' education has moved on years from the cycling proficiency. There's now bikeability level 1, 2 and 3. I think we would support mandatory training for people who cycle, but also we'd want to see motorists trained in how it is to be from a cyclist viewpoint. One of the things that's important is to understand the road from other users' point of view. And I cycle, but I also walk, and I also happen to drive occasionally. I think the key to the congestion and our city problems and also climate change is to drive much less and cycle more whenever you can. And that's for everybody on the roads, but to do it all in a responsible manner. We'd also support the police cracking down on that unregulated minority, as you say, whether they be cyclists or drivers or even pedestrians who behave quite irrationally in the road in times. And there is a case for saying any road user needs to be picked up on when their behaviour is putting others at risk.
In some ways, though, Richard, I mean, I suppose the one thing to welcome this would be, well, actually, finally, you can say, well, look, we are regulated. You can stop having a pop at us drivers. We're all in the same boat now, but it's all evil level playing field. If we've also got number plates in and we're paying, you can't pick on us anymore. You can't solely blame us for all the problems. So in some way, for the cyclists that actually are doing a good job and being very responsible, in some way, if you brought this in, perhaps you'd finally actually get some reprieve maybe from drivers.
Where it's been brought in other countries, the evidence shows that it just reduces the number of people cycling and puts off people who could cycle for short journeys but don't. What we need to be doing is encouraging people to cycle, but obviously within the law and within the rules, but safely on the road so they can cycle for short journeys. And when you do cycle regularly, you realise that cycling is not a dangerous activity. It's the actions of other road users, and particularly some drivers, and they are a minority, I'll accept that. We support the police cracking down on the minority of road users who cause the most harm to pedestrians.
And it must be quite tricky, regardless of whether it's a cyclist or on a scooter, a motorbike, a pedestrian. It must be quite tricky to be able to crack down on that minority a lot of the time, and particularly cyclists, perhaps because I suppose if you've got a car that's driving quite fast with a number plate, it's probably going to be easier to spot than perhaps a cyclist that hasn't got lights on, say, on a rural lane. So it must be trickier to crack down on that. But I know you welcome it as well, because I think it's just annoying, isn't it? It's always that small minority, isn't it?
It is the minority. I don't think this is the answer. Cycling without lights in a dark country lane is incredibly silly, and what we need is better education for people, so they need to be seen and need to be seen on the road in the right conditions. The other thing is that cycling is good for you as well as an individual. And once you start cycling and get over that initial fear with some training and support if necessary, there are schemes around to support even adult cyclists to restart cycling. We ran a bike buddy scheme for a while because a lot of people worry about not being able to find their way. And the worst thing you can do on a bike is constantly be looking at your phone to find your route while you're trying to concentrate on the road. It requires concentration being on the road these days, whether you're on a bike or in a car. And I think that's the big problem, is this lack of concentration from a lot of people, or from a minority of people who don't take care of other users. I've been cycling a lot in Norwich, and there are places I avoid and places I cycle very carefully, but I do think the more people we can get on bikes, the safer cycling becomes. That's shown in places like Holland, where they have a lot of cycling, and their safety record for injuries involving cyclists and pedestrians is much better than ours.
And why do you avoid certain areas of Norwich then? What's the crux of the issue? Why don't you feel safe?
It's like the multi-lane roundabouts. Since they took out the traffic lights on the top of Grapes Hill roundabout, it's made it much more difficult to cross on a cycle because the traffic's moving in several lanes and in different directions. Before, the traffic lights help you get to the front of the queue. So big roundabouts like that are bad news. Big major arterial road crossings are okay. We've got several in Norwich on the Ring Road where they've got traffic lights and the cyclist advanced stop line. They're quite easy to use for cyclists, and they work well in controlling the flow of traffic, I'm told, the traffic lights as well, rather than roundabouts. It's certain manoeuvres that you learn about on bikeability. What are the most dangerous manoeuvres and where are you putting yourself at most risk? And that's what you need to do, is work out the risks and minimise those risks, but keep cycling.
And I know we're sort of kind of a little while on now from those new recent changes to the highway code. So I mean, have they made any difference? Have they made cycling any safer for you?
I think they have made more people aware of junctions, and junctions are where a lot of the incidents occurred. But I think the proposal from Grant Shapps, his latest proposal, I think, is about buses. It's obviously part of a sequence of silly season proposals that probably won't come to any fruition. Does he not have anything else to do, like look at the railways, perhaps?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. And I suppose, if I could give you the magic wand, Richard, and maybe it's not number plates, maybe it's not insurance. If I could wave the magic wand and change some sort of highway law for you to make it easier for cyclists, is there anything more that could be done for you?
I think there is. It's a question of road user hierarchy, and what they have in places like Holland is they have automatic liability on the biggest road user. So, for example, if there's an incident involving a car and a cyclist, the driver is deemed to be automatically liable unless it's demonstrated otherwise. I'm not sure that would be acceptable in the UK, but something like that, so that the most vulnerable road users are protected, in all cases pedestrians and then cyclists. What I would really like to see, not a change in the law, but a change in the driving instruction, so that part of the whole course of driving instructions involves going out on a bike for an hour with a qualified cycle instructor just to see what it's like, even if you're never going to cycle again.
And it's interesting, I know in Norwich you've got sort of the Bell bike scheme that's just past 2 million kilometres, and I think there's some accountability on those. Because of course if you trash the thing, then it's linked to your account and your bank, isn't it? So there's sort of some accountability there. But I mean that's shown that people want to embrace this scheme. They want to get on their bike where they can.
Well, when you hire any vehicle, when you used to hire a car, there was a definite case of you're liable for what happens to that vehicle while you have it in your time, and that's why it's important to log in and log out of these schemes. But I think it's all key about education of all road users at all levels, so that they all treat other road users with respect. And I see also in the paper that the taxi driver is a comment from there supporting the scheme. I'm not sure it will help, but I always like to think as taxi drivers, as regular road users, and road users who know what they're doing, and I try and give them as much space as I can and let them get on with their business by letting them pass when possible.
Oh, Richard, it's great to catch up with you this morning. Thank you for joining me and helping us unpick that a little bit. Richard Bearman, the chairman of the Norwich Cycling Campaign.